So when you say you interview people, what types of people do you interview?
Everyone across the board. I mean, I've interviewed like from Wim Hof, the Iceman, who's won 26 world records. I don't even know who Wim Hof is, who climbed Mount Everest in shorts with no shoes on, and he's known as the Iceman. To to all kinds of psychologists and psychiatrists and just people that have achieved like top businessmen. So across the board spectrum, just you see consistently, from one side to the next, male, female. The underlying thing is we recognize the need to reach out to others and to help and to find meaning. And that's very hard to do when you've got a mental mess inside of our head. That's why I do the work I do, to try and help people to clear that mental mess. And so it's not a technique. I don't teach a technique. My system, I've got an app. If I'll hold it up here, it's called Switch. This is my most recent work that I used for my clinical trial. That's what I did was I used all these techniques I've developed and put them into the inbox as well, but on a technology platform. So you've got both options. But that's the trial that we used. That's the technique that I used. This particular app I used in my most recent clinical trials. And what we saw with everyone in the trial, we had experimental control group, standard, gold standard, random control trial, double blind, all the fancy language. What I wanted to see is that if you make people start being very aware of their ability to self-regulate, and you give them some sort of directed, organized mind management strategy. So they prepare their brain, and in preparing your brain is all that, the breathing, meditation, all that stuff. But the main thing is beyond that. The main thing is managing your mind day to day, dealing with the trauma, dealing with the day-to-day stuff, dealing with the brain building. When you teach someone to do that, does that change? And I've seen from all my other research that it does, but this is just taking it so much deeper. And it was unbelievable. So we had significant changes. I used brain technology. We used different psychological measures, narratives, people's story. We used blood measures. We even looked at people's DNA and the telomeres on the DNA, which are your chromosomes, and where my fingernails are. That's what we call a telomere, and a telomere determines cell health, which will determine system health, which means cardiovascular health or immune system health, etc., etc. And we looked at the relationship between cortisol, which we're all familiar with, and things like homocysteine and DNA. And when people were managing their minds, and I found this consistently over the years, but it's interesting in this most recent trial, the more self-regulated and organized you are in your mind management system, the more you will actually increase cellular health. So we had people, for example, that had their cellular health will tell you your biological age, the age of your organs, versus your chronological age. So we had people that were in the they were millennials, some of them, and they were actually, but their bodies were bodies of 55 and 65-year-olds. So their bodies were older than their age, and their inflammation throughout their body was absolutely shocking. And cortisol levels through the roof, and their brain was like, when we looked inside the brain at the energy response in the brain using QEEG, which is a very advanced way of looking at how the brain is responding, we saw really low activity across the front of the brain, which means that the identity shot, the ability to be cognitively flexible was shot. So, but what we saw in their story and the testing, we saw in the brain as well. We saw it reflected. Now, the brain you can't read the brain, someone's thoughts, you can't read love, but you can see a response. Your brain just responds. So when the energy of the brain is out of sync, so the two sides are out of sync and the energy is dropping off in certain areas and too low in certain areas, then people can experience extreme depression. Sometimes you can get too much of energy, and that's this massive, like a tsunami, and then you'll find very high anxiety. So we taught into my trial and the app, I taught people how to recognize and embrace the anxiety and the depression and the fear and the anguish and whatever emotion, to face that and to pull that up, and then to find the root of that, and then to manage through that. So that's the trauma side, and then teaching them how to also manage the day-to-day stuff. And we had people whose brains went from they were completely depressed to zero depression, 25% improvement in sleep, 81% drop, 81% improvement in managing anxiety and depression, cortisol levels significantly dropping to healthy levels, homocysteine going from where you're nearly dead levels to literally normal levels. And that's just, I can go on and on. We found so many relationships. And the point that I'm making here is that when you use your mind, your brain and body will respond. Doesn't mean that you can make magic. You're not going to now suddenly get blue eyes, if you've got brown eyes. It's not that nonsense. It doesn't mean that you're never going to be depressed or sad. Not at all. You have to be depressed and sad and anxious and experience all these emotions because you're human, and you would be very abnormally, you'd be weird if someone died around you and you didn't feel something. So you don't want to suppress your emotions. What you want to do is accept them and manage them. And that's the difference. And we live in a society today that as soon as you have any kind of weird emotion, either you've got the toxic positivity that the happiness psychology movement has brought in, where, oh, you mustn't have a sad feeling, replace it immediately with something good and don't let it. That's not real, because this thing is real. And if you shove it down, we saw the damage in the brain from people suppressing stuff. You can see literally, you literally get damage in your brain from suppressing. You have to, and the other side of the thing is, you also, the mental health movement today, this sort of standard, which is not scientific at all, which a lot of us scientists and people in the medical world and mental health world are fighting against. But it's that thing of, oh, you've got clinical depression. They look at your symptom, give you a diagnosis, and give you a brain damaging medication to numb your brain and disconnect you from your deep wisdom, meaningfulness of what life is. And that doesn't help people. And for 30 years, they've been doing this, and it's made things worse. So they say depression's increasing, anxiety's increasing, as though it's a cancer increasing. You can't.
Well, it's a fact we're becoming less happy as a world society. I mean, it's science that they've proven that, the World Happiness Report, they do surveys.
Yes,
people are getting less happy.
People are getting less happy, people are dying younger, but it's not that there's an illness of depression increasing, it's that there's a mismanagement of mind that will make people unhappy. So the unhappiness is coming from the side effects of drugs, the side effects of the stigmas of being labeled with a disease, and people being made fearful that, oh, and I've got depression and it's like cancer. It's not like cancer. It's you don't need depression validated by a disease label. It's valid enough. It's very, very important to deal with, but it's how are you dealing with it? So just labeling it and shoving it down as a symptom and trying to eradicate it, that's not going to deal with stuff. You've got to do the deep, scary work of facing the hard stuff, sitting with the uncomfortable, sitting with the depression. That's where you find, meanings through the hard stuff. I mean, anyone who's been through adversity, of the people I've interviewed, the hundreds and hundreds of people that I've interviewed, most people that are high achieving and have done great things have tremendously humble attitudes, have been through tremendous adversity, and have learned to sit with the uncomfortable and do the hard work and still go through bad days. So this rose
they ain't going away, right? They're always going to be there. It's your my first core, your mindset. How are you going to approach that? Is it a learning experience that you can grow from, or is it a roadblock that is going to stop you dead in your tracks?
Exactly.
That's it.